here. It's exciting. We want to share a little bit about Twin W Orchard, which is an awesome place. One of five orchards that Mr. Wells had back in the day. Take your little eyes and just look back over here on the wall. Thank you, Bob. Pointing to Mr. Wells. He lived in the house. This house, called the Wells House. He lived here from 1919 to 1950 when he passed away. Many of you know that he was president of the Wells and Wade and owner Wells and Wade Hardware Store for a long time, and Wells Fruit. No, Twin W Fruit.
Wells and Wade Fruit Company.
Wells and Wade Fruit Company, that was it. Thank you. It's one of my Wells House guys. Anyway, so the 5 orchards, 2 out by Arondo, Twin W, and then Buckhorn. No, Buckhorn was in Manson.
Buckfruit was in Manson.
Right.
Oxteam was on the way out to the
I always forget that one, Oxteam. And of course, as well, by the dam, and I'm pretty sure you're smarter than I am, but as well, it just hit me the other day that as well is A-Z Wells put together. So that's another big orchard. Oh, good, I'm not the only one. Good. So tonight we have 2 boys. They grew up on the Twin W.
One boy.
Orchard, one boy, and one older boy.
There you go.
Their dads were not the foreman, but you'll find out the dads. And they couldn't come tonight, but the boys came, and we want to hear stories from the olden days and fun things and what it was like to live on a big orchard like that in the day. So, thank you very much. I will introduce Kevin. Are you going to be first, Kevin?
Sure.
Okay, Kevin Litterell.
Litterell.
Litterell. Is going to be our first speaker, and he's the older boy. And then we'll have Jessi Mendoza, and we've got Jack as a volunteer here at Wells House. And where is Joshua? Joshua is from the Wenatchee Tech Center, and he came out to help us record this whole thing. So we'll have it forever. We appreciate that so much. And I'd like the other volunteers to stand up for a minute that work so hard here at Wells House. We've got the Otises in the back. Stand up. Tracy, Lisa, Karen, Jan. We meet every week. You're all invited. Bring your hammers and your scrub brushes and join us. And you're up. Okay, Kevin, you're up. Thank you.
So I do feel like a boy sometimes until this late in the evening when my knees start hurting and stuff like that. But Jessi and I are basically about a generation apart when it comes to Twin W. And I don't know if this is. Yeah, give it there. Not sure how to raise that. Here we go. Okay. I'll just kind of walk around with it. So I didn't realize I knew he looked young. I didn't realize he was that much younger than me. So I would have probably been in college when he was born. And so I would go back to my parents' house, and I knew that a lot of kids that were playing where I used to play, and hey, why are you out of my cookhouse yard is what we used to call it, where we had a lot of playground stuff and stuff like that. But I remember his parents really well. We were talking, and his dad probably tried to send me home from a thinning crew a dozen times when I was a kid, because I wasn't always the hardest working kid in the bunch. But I have some pictures here, and the first 3 are kind of a time, not really time lapse completely, but this was 1967, so I would have been about 2 years old then. And at that time, Twin W was from about right here is the cutoff on the riverside, and right about here is the cutoff here. So it's the beginning of the orchard expansion. I can't remember what year exactly it started. I want to say it was like 1940 something or maybe mid-30s. But it was starting to expand about this time. I almost bought the picture before this, when before Rocky Reach Dam was actually in, because the river used to go out, or the river front was in here, and most of these houses in here were actually down in this area. So a lot of them moved up. The house that I lived in, at least as a teenager, it's on its third location now. So a lot of changes happened then. When I was 2 years old here, we probably, now you can't even actually see the individual houses, but we had a lot of weird names for places and parts of the orchard back then. And most of the good ones have already been developed by this. But what's hard to see in this grainy of a picture is all the spaces between the trees here. This was some of the oldest, like 20 by 20 plantings, and you'd pick a tree a day, it seemed like, kind of thing. Those trees were just huge, and there were big spaces between them. And I loved that, the old orchard, because we could ride our motorcycles between the trees and do whatever we wanted. And all the irrigation was the old hand pipe that you'd have to move it up 2 rows over, one length of pipe at a time. So the way the orchard was laid out, this road, which is not really there anymore, but this house that's right here still is. Anything to the north of, or south of that was tract 1. This was tract 2, and the very edge down here where the Pierres built their kind of compound, we call that Hog's Back. No idea why. I was told that there used to be pig pens there a million years ago. I never saw them myself, I can remember, but it was Hog's Back. Still Hog's Back every time I travel by there. Track 3 here, which now has the waterfall down here and stuff like that, that was Cherry Hill. Never ever saw even a cherry seedling on Cherry Hill. But it was Cherry Hill. Tract 4 was along the edge here, and I'll tell you, it doesn't look like it from the road, but the top of this tract 4 is some of the steepest orchard ground I think I've ever been on in my life. It almost felt like you had to grab a tree to pull yourself up the hill sometimes. Tract 5 here, these pears, my dad said that when he first got to Twin W in the late 50s, the trees were old. They seemed old then. So that's 70 or 65 years ago or more. Those trees are still there. So when they say that you plant pears for your heirs, they're not kidding. Those pear trees last forever, and those are still productive pear trees. Track 5 apples here, and again, you can see a lot of spacing between the trees. And then the road to go up to the top of what we call the top of the hill, I mean, real inventive, top of the hill, had a little S turn in it and stuff. And it was planted kind of funny. So they planted over here first. It kind of looks like 3 blocks. Well, actually 6, but it's hard to tell there. That was track 7, and then later on they filled in track 8. So if you go to the next slide, so this is fast forwarding 18 years. So about the year I graduated from high school, 17 at the time, and I remember seeing the date on the picture when it was taken overhead. And I actually was 17 then, but a lot has changed. So they added the tract 8, which are these 4 blocks here. A lot denser planting in most of the areas. I forgot about tract 6. We were talking about that, Mike. That was McGinnis Place. Nobody ever knows of any McGinnis living here, but it was McGinnis Place. So I didn't even know it had a tract number until I was probably 12, 13 years old. This tract 9, out on the end of the pears stop here. I remember in the summer of, would have been, I think, 81 and 82, because I thought I was as strong as my dad. My dad's a 5'8" ball of fury, and I thought I was really tough. And we decided it was decided that this would be planted. This was the worst, rockiest piece of ground in the entire I think altogether there were 700 acres of land, and it was the worst place in the world. There was no shade, no nothing, and we're out there with a crowbar, and we have a caterpillar, but if your dad gets mad at you because you've been out the night before and you should do things you shouldn't do, he kind of tells you, no, you're gonna pick those rocks yourself. So we planted this track 9, and it's really rough, I guess, of all the things. It's kind of bittersweet when things aren't the same as your childhood. But when I think all of the work that we put into that, and now it's grapes, and I like wine too, but it should still be the trees I planted. That's just the way it should be. So what's hard to see here is the community part. I could not get a really good high resolution shot, from overhead or anything like that. But you can kind of tell it's pretty tight in there. Things aren't that far apart. It really did feel like a small town. It wasn't a store or anything like that, but it felt like your neighbors were, really good old time friends that you'd had forever and everything like that. And there were a lot of family ties to that too. Let's go to the third slide. And this is 2019, I think. A little bit of change. So all of the waterfront, now not all the waterfront was planted before, but most of it was. It was the worst orchard ground in the world. So it is being used for a higher and better purpose right now. Still hate to see it sometimes, no offense. But it really, it was old waterlogged ground that the trees would get bacterial diseases really easy because of the waterlog. It is being used for its better use right now. But the rest of the orchard had some pretty good ground to it, and I'm glad they kept some large chunks of it. Obviously, the airstrip wasn't there. You can kind of see the road that's still going down to McGinnis Place, what I call McGinnis Place. When I was 14, I remember I hit a sand wash on that road and ended up in the hospital for a week. And broke 6 ribs, punctured a lung, and Mom said, I don't like motorcycles anymore. So it got a little rough after that because there's not a lot to do out there without some entertainment. And again, all of the buildings, moved. It was really hard to describe how a bunkhouse worked on an orchard. 2 guys to a dorm room kind of thing, and they had their own mini kitchen and stuff, but it was fantastic, back then. We had the small pickers cabins, and sometimes a family would use 2 or 3 of those if that's what it took. And they weren't year round; they were just for part of the year. But you got to know people, and every harvest you'd have the same people that would come back. From California, they'd migrate up. A lot of things changed after I think it was like '86 with the amnesty laws and things like that. Used to be that coming across for a short period of time and then going back across the border was relatively easy, and so people were able to go back. When things got a little tougher and you couldn't go back, then you had to stay, and then it was hard to work year round because I don't know if you guys are aware that I'm in manufacturing now, and I can make my product 12 months out of the year. You can only harvest apples when they're ready. You can't schedule that February harvest for your gallon apples. So it's really one of those jobs that's really hard for somebody who's here full time year round to do without traveling. So I've got some views that might be kind of strange on that, but a lot of that is growing up. When things seem to work for everybody involved, and I think obviously orcharding itself started changing after the mid '80s, early '90s. Twin W changed a lot after Dole Fruit Company purchased it. Dole's a fantastic company. And there's still some people left from when Dole first came to the Northwest and purchased that. Martin Barron, who's I think he's actually president of the school board, isn't he? Or he was, came here because of Dole. We still have some really fantastic remnants of that, but at that time, when it became not Wells and Wade, everything changed. So I got a couple of notes here, just kind of, I'll randomly do a little stream of consciousness here. So, growing up as a kid, during my period, we were always aware that A.Z. Wells was a superhero. And I don't mean just small s superhero, I mean big S superhero. Who in the world gives a veritable fortune to charities? And it was a lot of money. It was huge amounts. And so you always felt like your parents, your mom, your dad, whatever, were doing good. They were helping keep the Boy Scouts afloat. They were helping to keep those charities afloat. And so A.Z. Wells was not just if I was, again, picking a superhero when I was a kid, I would have wanted to be A.Z. Wells. And that was something, even though he died long before I was born, I think everybody, who worked permanently at POW felt that pride. And of course, it wasn't just him, it was his wife Imogene too. That what they did for the community, not just my little portion of the world, I don't know how you match it. I don't know if you can. Things are so much different these days. So we always felt a sense of pride that our parents were doing something that was beyond growing apples. Couple of people that were really instrumental for me because they were my dad's heroes, I think. Does anybody know Les Green? Les Green worked for Wells and Wade Fruit forever. His father worked for Wells and Wade Fruit too. Les Green was the general manager of Wells and Wade Fruit for many years. He ended up developing ALS. But at one point, he was walking from he lived up by Birch Mountain Orchards, the Birch Mountain Wells and Wade Orchard, and he walked downtown to the office every day. And that was how he, got his exercise. One of the most caring men I've ever met. I still remember one time he pulled me aside. I'm like 9, 10 years old maybe, and he's just saying, he goes, yeah, exactly. I'm getting a little emotional here. Your dad is one of the people I admire most in my life. And I was like, well, why would you admire my dad? When you're 9 or 10 years old, it's, Dad's the guy who didn't get me what I wanted when we went to town last week. But I'll take this time to kind of talk about my dad. My dad dropped out of school in 10th grade because his family, who lived at Twin W also, they'd come out from Arkansas, like a lot of people from the South back then. Things were really rough down there. Came out, they wanted to move back to Arkansas, and they did. He didn't want to go. And so he stayed, asked for a permanent job, and got that, and had to take care of himself from, 16 years old on. And I think my dad had a little bit of he was kind of embarrassed that he didn't graduate high school for probably a long time. He did go back and get his GED. But I remember one time when I was just starting algebra in probably junior high school or whatever, coming home trying to figure out, X equals what? And I can't do this. And he sits down and he does it. And I'm like, Dad, where did you learn this? He's like, well, that's how you do a spray formula. That's how you calculate this. He had no idea that he'd learned so much from farming that, and I told him, I said, Dad, this is stuff that you wouldn't have been doing in 10th grade in 1960 or whatever. I think he felt a lot more proud of it back, after that. But my parents were fantastic. I had to leave at the Beaver household out on the farm. Truly, they called my brother the Beav later on in school. So I got to be Wally by default. But Les Green was just a fantastic man who really, showed me a lot about how to treat people well. And then Clifford Nelson, who was the manager before my father. And I remember when Clifford retired and my dad had become manager, and I was still probably early teens, 13, 14 years old. And he said, let's go to town. One day we get in the truck and we've got lawnmowers in the back. And apparently Clifford had hurt himself or something. And my dad and I went down and mowed his lawn in Wenatchee. but that's the kind of leader he was, and he taught my dad those leadership skills that, you know, when somebody who has helped you needs you, you do things for them. And that's a lesson that I think is hopefully, it's hopefully captured in me. I think my brother, if he asked me to do something, he might disagree that I'm that kind, but yeah, he's my brother. So a bunch of things that, you know, just, like I said, I got a little stream of consciousness here, things I remember. So back then, no cell phones, obviously, but they had this radio phone, and you could make these crazy calls on it that it was almost like a walkie-talkie and stuff like that. Anytime that would go off, that was like a huge thing. Everybody be quiet, everybody be quiet. I remember that, you know, every time my dad would get one, he only got a couple calls a month, it seemed like, on that thing, but it always had to be there, you know. I remember not seeing mom during the week during payroll and harvest. Everything was by hand. Can't even imagine doing that now. And what was crazy, so when my dad was promoted to manager, this is the first time I ever remember locking a door, because we had payroll checks in the house, you know. I never remember locking a door. I don't think anybody else ever did out there. I remember leaving my motorcycle on a stand out in the front yard for several nights in a row, no problems. So it took me a long time after moving into town to learn to lock the door, because it wasn't automatic. Yeah. There was a real sense of family, both literal and figurative. Again, Bill and Donna here, but my aunt and uncle, Donna and Bill. Actually, Donna's my dad's cousin, but she was my aunt. Bill had several family members who lived and worked on the orchard. It was a shirt-tail relationship to so many people that it default was family. Like I talked to Jessi and I told him I was going to use a little bit of his Iris article. So he's mentions in it that his parents met while being assigned to the same picking row as picking partners. He may get mad at me for this, but it was probably my dad who assigned them together. So because my dad was probably a crew boss about back then or something like that, maybe the foreman. Or if it was my dad, it was very likely Bill. So, you know, one of your parents might be mad at my dad for one thing or the other, just not sure which one. So, so the cultures back then were pretty unique, and I didn't appreciate it then as much as I do now. A lot of Southern people, obviously, you know, a lot of people, my mom's family came out from Oklahoma, my dad's family from Arkansas. So, what's that?
I said a lot of them come from Tennessee too.
Yep, that
was partly me.
Yeah, my parents actually know people from Tennessee that they'd come out here actually with. They'd met on the road and traveled together, and which is strange to me now, but it was a week-long trip or more back then. And the other thing I didn't, again, appreciate as much was the Hispanic culture. I mean, I didn't even think about it then, because I hate to admit this, but I don't speak Spanish very well. I can understand some, but everybody wanted to speak English. And it just never occurred to me that there was a huge difference, you know. So I did appreciate food. I did appreciate, you know, we used to roast the goat in the pit, and oh my gosh, talk about fantastic. And I got some pictures of some of the harvest feasts here coming up, but we had a Native American family, the Plant family. And again, I remember very close to my parents. So we got, you know, introduced to that, or at least that, you know, their tribal culture a little bit. And we had Japanese trainees part of the year, so we got to introduced a little bit to some Asian culture, and a few hippies. We didn't get as many hippies as Aubles did. Aubles down the road. Aubles had a lot of hippies. But we did get some, and I remember one guy we called Fuzzy. I don't know, I don't think he shaved in 30 years kind of thing, and stuff like that. But it was just a mix of people, and again, everybody got along. Well, not everybody got along, because I fought with my brother, I fought with my cousins, stuff like that. But everybody looked out for each other. It was a different time. So I've already talked about Hogs Back, Cherry Hill, McGinnis Woods, Top of the Hill, again, real original. So we used to have this this place. Can you go back one slide? Sure. I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much time, but because I know Jesse's got a lot of good stuff. But, so the house I grew up in is right about there, and right across the driveway, there was a place called the Cookhouse. And it was called the Cookhouse because back when I was very young, and before I was born, they actually used to cook lunches there. So at lunchtime you'd come in, you'd pay your 10 cents or 15 cents, or it was held out of your check, or however that worked. And they had a cook who would cook for the crew, and then they go back out again. After when the world became apparent to me, it was already closed. But the lawn out front, the Cookhouse lawn, became our baseball field, football field, everything else. And so everybody would gather there, and especially for things like reunions or harvest parties or things like that. We had the bunkhouse. We had basketball hoop at the shop with no pavement. I mean, talk about bouncing a basketball on dirt. It was pretty tough. So, but we did it because it was fun. We didn't really have a lot of other things to do out there. I kind of resented when we first went to Eastmont schools in 7th grade, because we had the 3-room schoolhouse out in Rondo. I resented that these guys could go and hang out together after school for the first probably 6 months or so. Then I realized my friends out in Rondo were a lot cooler anyway. And I wasn't getting in trouble, as much trouble as they were. We could motorcycle everywhere. Sun Cove, you guys all know where Sun Cove is. That was empty. I lived at Sun Cove for a little while. I'm still part of the member of their Facebook page. I see them complaining about a few things, and I'm thinking, if you only knew, what things were like back in the day. But it was nothing to get home in the fall or the spring, obviously not the winter, but in the fall or the spring, and you'd hop on your motorcycle and go to your friend's house 6-7 miles away or something like that. You could ride across anybody's orchard, nobody cared. It was pretty fantastic. I didn't appreciate it as much until I realized I couldn't give my kids that same experience. And that was a bitter pill to swallow, because that's how everyone should have grown up, to me. I think that's most of the notes I have, and I got a few pictures, and let's go on to the next picture. So this is not obviously Twin W, but this is where all the kids from Twin W went. We were the last school bus stop for Rondo School District. When you went to Stafford's, which is just north, now it's Drinkwater, I think, you went to Chelan. So we were the last kids, and then we got bused to Eastmont. And the year after I graduated was the first time a student in the Rondo School District choiced to Waterville instead. So, but so Bill and Donna, who aren't here, but Terry's met, their sons, my cousins. There's Dwayne, and there's Brad, and this is me. I didn't want to say that, but I was a little skinnier then. But that was 11 years old. Yeah. So, next slide.
You were the Mustangs, is that right?
Yeah, I don't know why that's going sideways. Yeah, I think there's something different now. I can't remember what they are now.
Eagles.
Eagles?
What year is that, Kevin? Is that
77. Yeah.
Now, Rondo is on the east side of the river.
Correct.
And Twin W Orchards was on the west side, I believe.
No.
No, it was okay.
Yeah,
It was
we're
over on the east side also.
Yep, just north of Sun Cove.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And then did you live on Sunny Slope and the Birch Mountain? Was that a set of orchards also?
That was Birch Mount. It was just called Birch Mount. Was a Wells Wade orchard.
Okay.
Right up in the hollow there, and I knew a lot of people there, obviously through my dad and things like that. But
and that was in the hollow, you say?
yeah.
Okay, the hollow is, where from, say, Easy Street now?
If you take School Street
Okay, School Street,
and it turns into
no,
Knowles Road, yeah,
yes,
yeah, right in there. And actually, it was kind of
so it's
strange.
right in that area,
Yeah,
okay.
there's houses there now, but when I went back and got my tree fruit degree after doing something different
Yes.
for a while, I actually planted orchard there for the
Yes.
college. And
Well, it was probably about a half a mile above Easy Street.
yeah,
Yeah, and then it was in that hollow there.
Yep.
Yeah, before you started really going up on the mountain.
yep. And initially that was donated to the college, part of that land.
Was it really?
Yeah, so it kind of tied the AZ Wells thing all in, not just,
And that was, and that contribution to the college was in the early 50s, I think. Or maybe it was later than that.
no, I think that was actually in the late 80s, early 90s. That was
Oh, is
after,
that right?
yeah, that was
That was
after
much
Mr.
later.
Wells had passed, yeah.
Yeah,
But it was after, I believe it was after Dole Fruit had purchased it, but there was an agreement in there that the college could pick some land if they ever got an agriculture program again.
do you know, somebody around here must know, what year A.Z. Wells gave this to the college? His house.
50.
When he passed
No, it was
away.
earlier than, because
I think it was the early 50s.
didn't they,
49 and 50.
I thought they gave this before they passed.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm thinking of something else.
He passed away in 1950.
Right.
Yes,
And this was the first college classrooms,
yes.
so, yeah.
Right in there.
So this picture I put in here because, does anybody know Fabiola Barbosa? Okay, Fabiola works now for the Washington Apple Education Foundation, and she's worked for the college. She's got a doctorate now. So this is her parents, and these are a couple of friends. But her parents were really instrumental. I mean, she's quite a bit younger than me. She looks a lot younger than me, but she's maybe 6, 7 years, 5, 6 years. I can't remember. But her parents were fantastic people, and really, like Jesse's dad, he was my crew boss for a lot of years as I was growing up. Probably very frustrated with me at times, but very patient too. So, next slide. They just happened to be in several of the pictures. I didn't have time to go out to my dad's and dig through all of the stuff. I kept thinking I had more time than I did, but again, there's Fabi's parents. There's Fabi over on the right, and this is my dad. And this is at a harvest dinner. This would have been in our basement one fall. I'm not sure what year, but Fabi's probably what, 10 or 11? I can't tell. Maybe a little older. Okay, next. And again, this is her parents and my dad again, and this was actually me. But that's again at a harvest dinner. Next, I got several harvest dinners that I actually had on hand. So this is in our basement, and what you can't see here is that there's amazing Southern food. There's amazing Mexican food. There's fantastic Japanese food. You name it. And the harvest dinners were just unreal that we had back then, and everybody came. Most people were probably out on the yard eating at that point, but those were like big family reunions for us.
Obviously after harvest to celebrate.
Well, it was sometimes just before the end of harvest, depending. It was before our Japanese students had to go back to Big Bend because they were through Big Bend College, and so sometimes their cutoff date was a hard date, and sometimes harvest was a little bit later, but it was usually right at the end of harvest. Okay, next. Okay, so this I had to do a double take on. So these are my parents, and these are 3 of 4 Japanese students one year. It says 88, but I'm not sure that that's accurate. That could be. That could be accurate. But, so I thought I had the same picture twice. There's 3 here, and then the next picture, apparently this student here and on the other one switched. So one of the students was taking the picture each time. But, so there's four students across the 2 pictures. But it was amazing. I knew nothing about any Asian culture at all. And when I was, super young, and when I started actually interacting with the Japanese students, some of them, wanted to be dairy farmers, but that just happened to be their where they were put was on an apple farm, and they might change their mind and want to do something different. But my dad would get letters. My mom and dad would get letters 20 years later. Every year they'd get a card from some of these students. Probably, I'd say 20 to 25 students were almost every year writers. So it was pretty incredible. How, again, now as an adult, I understand they were very young. That was a huge thing in their life. To me, they were just there for a while. They were fun, and I got to hear some funny words, and they were good athletes, so we played baseball, and that was about it. To them, that was a real formative thing. And I didn't realize how much that affected them until later in life. Next. So this is the Longs. I was hoping that they were going to be here. I was going to tease, if the boys came, I was going to tease them about their mullets. But yeah, it was like having a second set of parents in case mine didn't see what I was doing wrong. To this day, if somebody were to walk up behind me and say, Kevin T, I'd be scared, because that's what Donna would say. And but Brad and Dwayne were a month older than me, and when they were born, I was 5 ounces bigger than both of them put together. Growing up, they were always bigger than me until old age took care of that. All right, next one. So this is one of my family reunions. This is the backyard of our house, and that's probably half the people that were there. Some from probably most from my mom's side, some from my dad's side, some people from the orchard. But that was about half of a normal Memorial Day family gathering at my parents' house. My mom was like the matriarch of her family. She was the 10th of 11 kids, but she ended up being the matriarch. And the one thing that was fantastic, she always involved my dad's family, even though most of them were in Arkansas. But a lot of people traveled up for this once a year and things like that. So I remember a lot of times when it's like, why do we always have to do this at our house? Because we have the room, obviously. But why do we have to do this at our house? Now, I would love to have just one more Memorial Day, where everybody could come to our house. So, all right, next. This is in our backyard again. My parents renewed their vows. My son's still a little bit of a crybaby, but I think he was probably about 3 there. My daughter's back here. These 2 are my nieces, and that had to be like their 35th, I think, wedding anniversary. So, but we had again a yard full of people, you name it, full of people. So that was a really good memory from back then. All right, next. Oh, that's what I ended up as after high school. So actually I had hair back then. I like to prove that to people, even though it doesn't really matter anymore. But I look back at that now and I kind of see that smile, and I think, I don't know if I would have been able to smile like that if I hadn't grown up at Twin W, honestly. I'm sure I probably would have found a way to do something okay, but I really don't think anybody in that generation was as lucky to have grown up there, and I don't really have an ending.
That's a great ending right there.
All right, well, it's gonna be kind of hard to top that. Should have gone first. Well, I have a different perspective, or it's very similar, but basically different in the sense that it's, in the little bit more in the future. I never worked in the orchard, different from Kevin. So it was my dad that actually worked in the orchard. So this is my dad. Oh, cool! You were able to brighten it up. Not quite sure exactly what year this was, but apparently I did learn this was at number 6. What did you call it?
McGinnis Place.
McGinnis Place. Yeah.
6, yep.
Yeah. So this was right down by the river. So my dad was an immigrant from Mexico. He immigrated originally 75, so he was born in 56. So you guys do the math. And he just worked in California. Then he went back, and then he returned in 76 and went to work originally in Eniac. He was living with some family. I mean, just imagine just leaving everything and everybody that you know in Mexico, just family, friends, everything. And so just kind of risking everything and just kind of embarking on this adventure. And so he had some family and a few cousins in Yakima. So he was staying there and he kept hearing, there's a lot of work over in Wenatchee. He's like, okay, well, let's go over there. And they would just drive around. He's like, okay, let's stop here. This looks like a good place. Anyhow, so they worked there for a little bit, and apparently they were paying $2.50 an hour, and you had to work weekends. So it's like, oh man, that's not such a great deal. So they kept hearing about this other place across the river. It was like, oh, this is Twin W. I was like, all right, you get paid $2.75, and you get weekends off. It's like, all right. That sounds like a better deal. And an opportunity for housing. I was like, all right, I'll take it. Yeah, so that was a really, really big win. And so, I mean, he loved it, and you can see why. I mean, it was like all the pictures. It looks extremely beautiful. It was beautiful. Like living that close to the river. I mean, I have so many great memories just from going down and fishing, and I'll show some pictures here in a little bit to the Japanese workers, and I'll share a couple, maybe a story or two there. And just going around with my BB gun, it was just the largest playground and the orchard. It was great. I mean, like same. I wish I could give, my kids that, and that would be pretty cool too. It's just like, all right, the world is your oyster. Go ahead. And we sure took advantage from all the hills. Like, everything is like sloping down towards the river. So I would go just walk down, kill some grasshoppers, get some worms and go down fishing. I didn't know anything better to do. It was fun. We kind of entertained ourselves. And the benefit was that there was like dozens of other families living there. So there was my cousins, and both of my parents each have 9 siblings.
Wow.
And there was many cousins, many of which lived in that same Twin W orchard. And so it was nice having a lot of similar aged kids around, so we could play soccer, baseball, whatever, you name it, we were able to play it. So it was just such a large playground. That's what I thought about it. Not only that, but I'm assuming it was Mr. Wells that decided to put an actual playground in the middle of all the houses.
No.
And there was a lot of play area of huge fields around it.
That was put in after I was already grown. That was my mom.
Your mom put that in?
My mom picked that stuff out, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
That's
Thank you to your mom.
Yeah.
Because, we definitely were able to take full advantage.
We weren't that lucky.
Yeah, so how I see it, we reaped all the benefits of that. So it was phenomenal. So if you want to scroll down through some other pictures. So we were able to, enjoy some time. As you can see, I was very, very happy. There was like, huge fields. And so there was all these picker cabins, and it seems like everything and everybody had a nickname. Like there's a nickname in Spanish, it's called Pata Larga, Bigfoot. I'm not sure who, Kevin, do you know who that was? Was that your dad?
No, my dad's tiny.
Okay, all right. So it wasn't your dad, maybe it was your Uncle Bill, I don't know.
That was the house that I first remember living in there.
And the one in the corner.
Yep.
Yep, that's the one I first lived in too. And fun fact, you later moved to that other house, right?
The greenhouse.
Yep, the greenhouse, and then I also moved to that greenhouse too. So we kind of lived in those same houses, kind of got promoted. And so my dad was actually one of the crew bosses, and Kevin worked under him. So I'll have to get the 411 on Kevin from my dad. So I mean that was really fun. My dad is like very, very shy and very reserved, as you'll see one of the pictures from here. Can you scroll through one of the other pictures? He loves trees. He's fully retired now, and till this day he can't stay away from trees. So I just took this picture this afternoon. These are persimmon trees that has growing in front of his yard that he's trying to regrow. They kind of froze out on him, so they were able to revive them back. So all these roots are coming back from the bottom. He was able to build a house in Mexico back in his hometown. Brand new house, super beautiful. And he plants all sorts of trees out there too. Coconuts and mangoes and who knows, all sorts of other tropical fruits. And so he continues to this day. That's like his one and only hobby. Still taking care of trees. You can't get it out of the system. So we were actually living in Twin W ever since I was born in '88, all the way up until 2002, when pretty much they said, hey, we sold the orchard, you guys got 30 days to move out. And so luckily they had purchased a house over in Wenatchee, and so that's when we moved over to Wenatchee. But yeah, my dad talks about the differences when Dole bought the orchard, and the differences that made is just like, man, they could kind of start to see the writing on the wall that just things were not gonna go well. And one of the workers kept telling my dad, hey, one of these days they're gonna come around with this big machine and it's just gonna go pick up the trees, pick them up and throw them out. And they kept looking around. I was like, yep, sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And now there's that development down there. So they were right. So go ahead. So I remember playing in the middle of the orchard, or playing in the orchards too, but also just, having fun in the summertime. But one thing about Mexicans is that we love our salsa. And one thing that you need in salsa is tomatillos. So I remember just playing baseball, soccer, whatever, and then my dad would yell for me, because in this case, you'd have like 500 yards away from the houses and the playgrounds. So he would yell at me to come, and I had to peel tomatillos. And those are some dark memories, but I don't like that part. So go ahead. So this is my dad. So back wearing the Dole hat. This is my uncle as well, so they're kind of interrelated. So my mom's sister married my uncle, yeah. So, and then this guy, I have no idea who he was. But I do remember my dad telling me an interesting story about one of the Japanese workers. He says that many of them were like very motivated to learn English, and a lot of them picked it up right away because they were here for a few months. And that was very interesting. My dad even learned like some curry recipes too. And so there was like everything, they lived up in we called it in Spanish la casona, so the big house. There was like all the places where they would be living. So that was very interesting. And so there was one time that he was telling me the story not too long ago that there was this Japanese guy that he was working, and he heard a sound in the middle of the orchard. He's like, oh, man, what is that? And the Japanese guy's like, hada heavy. And he's like, what? And so apparently, hada heavy is the one and only word that my dad remembers, because it means rattlesnake. So apparently that's what he thought he heard, and he was freaking out about that. And I don't know why, but both my wife and I, she also grew up in Orondo, not in Twin W, but we both have been fascinated with Japanese and Japanese culture. And in 2018, we were both able to travel to Japan for 2 weeks. And so that was incredible. So I had completely forgotten that there was Japanese individuals that came down and worked with us, or worked with my dad. So that was pretty cool. All right, we can go to the next picture. So the neat thing, like I said, it was about just living. I mean, just look at the view that we had all the time. Like we had the river right there, all the orchard along the river. And so the benefit of having so many cousins and friends, like, birthday parties and things like that. So we just had a blast. Like it was fun. And there was always some different game that somebody was coming up with. And so we really, really enjoyed it. All right, go ahead. And so this is my parents and my 2 younger brothers. So something that my dad always kind of stressed was that it's very important he always encouraged us, hey, I work really hard in the orchard and it's always really hot, whether it's really hot, 100 degrees or whatever, or it's really, really cold, we're still out there working no matter what. And it's I wouldn't want that for you necessarily. And I worked in the orchard too eventually, and I know I didn't want that kind of work. So he always stressed education. And so no matter what, you get an education. And he stressed that with everybody, with all of my siblings. And so with him immigrating here, he had to drop out at 2nd grade. Just his parents was hey, you need to get out, you need to come home and work with us in order to make ends meet, basically. And so that's what he had to do. And so he wanted to allow us to pursue an education. And fortunately, we were. So I ended up graduating from Wenatchee Valley College in 2009, and then transferred to WSU, got my degree. And also my 2 younger brothers both also graduated from WSU, go Cougs. And my brother works at Confluence and the IT department. And my other brother got his nursing degree from Spokane at WSU, and he works as a surgeon nurse down in Bend, Oregon. So, yeah, so this is part of our fishing experience. So my dad was pretty excited about this walleye that he caught down, this was in Chelan Falls. So this was not too far away from Twin W. He was pretty pumped about it, very proud, and I mean, I kept going down to the river no matter what and fishing, and I caught all sorts of fish. That was pretty fun. Go to the next one. I don't know if you guys remember the big snow 96? Yeah. That was a good one. So imagine having this big playground with what was it, 3 feet of snow probably, something like that? I don't know. I just remember creating this igloo thing. It was really fun. And there was this it slopes down towards the river. So you can imagine with the sled, we had a good time. So yeah, we really, really enjoyed that. Go ahead. And so that's pretty much it. Talking about small world. So how we all got connected, it's kind of interesting. So I'm in Rotary, and then I met Joe St. Jean, and that's how we got connected with Terry. And then Terry's son, and he now lives down in Twin W. And so that's pretty cool. And also another connection, and obviously now Kevin, we got connected, and that's another small world. And Fabiola, I met her as well. I was oh, you live in Twin W too? Yeah, I live there too. Another interesting fact is that part of a Rotary Club is also Linda Evans Parlett. And my uncle, who also was around here around the same time that my dad was coming up, he ended up going to work over in Chelan. Well, it turns out Linda one day was, we were having lunch at Rotary, and she's like, hey, do you happen to know Solomon Mendoza? He's like, yeah, that's my uncle. It's oh, well, gosh, he was our foreman at our orchard. And I was oh, I remember going to that very same house. I was yep, that's our house. And that was our orchard. And now I'm one of great friends with her son, Luke. And so it's kind of a small world that we kind of live in and really get to enjoy a lot of memories and experiences around the same areas. And it's funny how we're all connected in one way or another. So that's pretty much it. I don't got anything other experience. I'll open it up for Q&A though. Yeah.
What's the Japanese connection? I don't get it. Did they go to Big Bend Community College?
That is a good question, Kevin. Is that what it was?
Yeah, so there was this thing, and there still is, I think, a group called the JATP, Japanese Agricultural Training Program. And locally, Big Bend Community College was their central base. And so what they would do is they would come to America, they would study at Big Bend for a few months, they would come to us. It seemed like several months, but it was probably only 3 or 4 months maybe. They would do a short term with us, they'd go back to Big Bend for the winter, and then they'd do like a year-long internship at something that was more of their primary, what kind of agriculture they wanted to focus in. It could be anywhere probably as far as Idaho, Montana, Oregon. But we usually got 4 students a year, sometimes only 3 because some would get homesick and decide to leave early, or sometimes we got 4 or 5. But they were usually, I think they'd already done 1 year of agricultural college in Japan and then came over here. And I know that Fabiola talked about when she was at Big Bend, dealing with some of the students and, helping them through some of the things. But it was a really unique thing. And I know that in the winter, we would always go down sometime in December to Big Bend, and they'd do a play, a big pageant. And there were probably 70 to 100 students, and we would get 4, and other Wells and Wade orchards would get some, but it wasn't just Wells and Wade, it was a lot of farms. One thing I'd like to point out, and Jessi brought this up, I had no idea that his dad would have stopped school in the 2nd grade because he was a smart man. And one thing I think that growing up on a farm, again, you don't realize it when you're young because your dad's stupid. My dad was the dumbest guy in the world. That when I was 14, he was a little smarter when I was 34, and now he's a genius. But you learn early on that there's a huge difference between intelligence and education.
Yes.
You can have some really educated people that maybe aren't as intelligent or whatever, and usually it's opportunity. That's usually the deciding factor. So when put in an opportunity to do the things that Jesus, his father did, he was really good at the things he did when he had the opportunity to learn it and grow it and stuff like that. So, I look at a guy like that, if he had have had the opportunity to go past, in formal education, be far beyond us.
Yeah.
So I think that really drove home that don't judge somebody by their education level, judge them by their character and their raw intelligence. And he's a very intelligent man, so you got very lucky there.
Oh yeah. Numbers kind of run. He was very good with numbers. He knows dates, numbers, anything with numbers, and numbers seem to run a lot in my family. So I'm in banking. Then my cousin Solomon's daughter, she's a CPA. My other cousin, she's a CPA. She's actually on the foundation, the Wenatchee Valley College Foundation board. And my other cousin, she works here at the college too. So it's like all these CPAs and numbers. So yeah, very, very smart guy.
Couple more questions? Gosh, this has been fabulous.
Well, I want to know how you didn't have to work on the orchard, because I got stuck out with the big pinning crew when I was 11.
Yeah, he tried to get me out there. I ended up going out and working at the Cox orchards up above.
Okay.
Yeah, so I worked up there for cherries. I just did cherry swamping up there.
He had to go fish.
Yeah. I was too busy. I had to take advantage of the summers.
You might have been a nicer kid than me too. Maybe that's part of it.
No, he put me to work. Yeah, we had like all the grass that you saw there. Yeah, I had to mow that lawn. I was like, I don't know, 8 years old, and I could like barely push those huge gas-powered mowers. And yeah, in the middle of summer too. So he would stop me not only to peel the tomatillos, but he would also stop me and be like, all right, now you gotta mow all this lawn. And it's like, great. That's fun. Yeah. So that was interesting.
some photographs on the table of some of the buildings that you moved 3 times.
The building that I in my teens, you know, in the manager's house, I guess basically. Yeah, it started out at the river, and then it went to its location that I grew up in the, you know, the second picture there, and then now it's farther up on what do you call that?
Up on it's
Braze.
off of Braze.
Yeah, up on Braze. And it's much different than it was whenever we were kids. There's no trees around it. There's no shrubs or anything like that. But it's in its at least third location. And if you go forward on his pictures, I'll show you a little something here. No, maybe backwards. Let me see. So this is some stuff that is I wish I had pictures of. Go back to where he was playing in the RV with the infant. There you go. So these cabins back here are actually 2-room cabins. And they actually, when these were down at the river, they were bigger and they split them in half and made them a 2-room cabin. So there was a sleeping area and then kind of a kitchen slash, you know, living area or whatever. And these were insulated and fit for year round. And we had people that lived in those for several years until there was a regular house available or something like that. But these were originally down at the river also. And behind this, there was there were 6 of these 2-room cabins. And then there was a wash house.
Oh,
Do you remember the wash house?
oh yeah, I remember.
And I remember my dad got mad at me one year. I was probably just able to drive, and I maybe came home a little bit later than I should have, and might have been doing something I shouldn't have been doing or something like that. And he decided it was time for me to paint the wash house. It had never been painted before. You know how long it takes to paint brick, like cinder blocks and everything? And so that was a couple-week job. Painting that. So I remember this yard so well, and I remember shooting birds with BB guns.
Oh yeah.
First time I shot a bird, I cried. Right down, just off that hill.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely a lot of BB gun memories too.
Question.
So is the orchard where Dan and Joy Cox have, is that all part of Twin W?
I think they bought it. They're the ones that bought it originally after in 2002. They bought Twin W, and then they're the ones that sold it to the winery folks and
Oh, okay.
development and all that sort of stuff, from what I understand.
I think that they purchased a portion of the uphill part, the track 7 and track 8, and the Twin W brand name for some things. But I don't think that Dan and Joy bought the waterfront part. That was kind of separate.
Just the higher piece where the
Yeah.
home is.
Yeah, up. Just if you look out from their home, that flat area right there, what we call the top of the hill, that right next to what was the oh, I can't believe it, the McNeil orchards that were right next to that. Yeah, I worked for Dan and Joy one spring break, and fantastic neighbors to have.
Is it possible to get down in that area and drive around?
Yeah, there's a road, like right by the Pears. There's a road that goes all the way down there.
Is there a name or something?
Sandy Shores.
Sandy Shores.
Is
Yeah.
like,
Sandy Shores.
oh,
That's
There,
the road.
most of the roads that you could see, like in 83 and 67, are not accessible. They've been,
right.
Gated or
yeah, or plowed, so you can't quite get to them. I don't know if they let you walk around too much down there, but to the houses, to where Mike's at, you can definitely go down there.
Can we all come visit you, Mike?
Absolutely. And a lot of the contours are still there, like looking at the aerials.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
When you were talking before the dam, I've got a photo my mom got me, aerial like from 1939. And
Oh, wow.
I mean, looks the same, right? But nothing there. But definitely the river's changed.
I was telling your mom there's a pine tree that I planted 40 plus years ago.
I took
And-
pictures trying to find the one you were talking about.
I can show you on the map if we, but it's not a big deal. But my uncle used to reforest, you know, after fires and stuff, they had these little pine trees in tubes, and
Yeah.
I remember planting one. I vividly remember planting it just because I had it, you know, I was walking up this hill, I didn't want to carry it. There you go. And now it's huge. And I still, if we drive down through there, I have to look at it every time. Just little things like that.
That's neat.
Some of the contours you look at, and you remember walking through that trail or something like that. But it's a little bit, like I said, a little bit disheartening, but at the same time, nothing stays the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for Jessi staying young. 'Cause it's-